Let's create posters for BTS's song Black Swan. Before I even started painting the portraits of the BTS members, I had a clear idea of what I wanted the finished posters to look like. As I wanted there to be a clear consistency in all the images, I decided to finish the most important elements first, and this of course was the portraits and the dance poses. Next up was figuring out how to put it all together in a way that would meet the idea I had in my head. For each of the individual members' posters, I duplicated the portrait and merged the layers so the portrait was on one layer and the background was on a separate layer. I did this because I hadn't quite figured out what I wanted to do with the background, and keeping the background on a separate layer makes it a lot easier for me to discard it without disturbing the portrait. Then I imported the dance poses and worked on where these should be going in the image. As the dance poses are quite small, I knew I didn't want them to disappear in the background, so I opted to put them over the portraits, or more specifically over one of the shoulders. This way they weren't in the way of the faces, but it's also a fun little play on the angel or devil on my shoulder theme. I've mentioned in the process videos for all of the portraits that I worked on all 7 at the same time, and that's really been the case for these posters as well. This will be quite apparent as you see me try the same thing in all of the posters, as I really needed to see if the idea would work with all of them and not just one of them. For instance, this meant adding the dance poses from Jimin's solo, but also adding part of the choreography featuring the member in the portrait. In the end, I went with the snippets from Jimin's dance solo because I felt this added more dynamics to the posters, and it also made sense with the spotlight I wanted to add. Another thing that I had to try out with all the posters was how to add the spotlight. Initially, I thought it would be nice to have them coming from behind the portraits, but when looking at them closer, it just wasn't working. This is because it would look like the light would come from their ears, which wasn't what I intended, but it also wasn't in line with the global lighting set in the portraits themselves. So instead, I ended up moving the spotlight so it came from outside the image, which meant that at times I had to add some more highlights to the portrait as well. Part of the theme behind Black Swan is the relationship an artist has with their craft and what happens when there's a loss of love or joy for that craft. This is a theme I also wanted to bring into my posters, which I did by adding the falling feathers. Because falling feathers can be seen as a symbol of hope, but also of change and loss. Of course, falling feathers are also used in the song's onstage performances, so it further ties the posters to the song in that way and not just the music video. Those paying close attention probably spotted that I added some dark feathers inside each of the spotlights. And I've added 6 feathers to each spotlight because BTS is known to be 7 members, so the 6 feathers in the spotlight with Jimin symbolize that they're all together, despite the spotlight being on just one of them. By the time you get to this bit, you already know that I'm only sharing the process for the compositions used in the posters. This is because all of these parts were created in Procreate, which really kindly captures the process so I can export them and make these videos. However, I needed to add typography and I required some more precise alignment, so the final touches were done in Photoshop, which doesn't record any process. I also haven't found any useful third-party apps that can help me to capture these things, but I'd love suggestions if you have any. I can reveal there was a lot of trial and error to find the right typefaces. but also to find the right position for the title. This is also why there's a difference in format between these compositions and the final posters, as I needed a bit more room to add the title. Of course, I also toyed with putting the text behind their heads, but I decided against it as it sometimes just wasn't legible enough. Of course, I also had a plan for the start and end pose, which I decided to pair with all the portraits. So again, I'm adding the same elements here: the portraits, the dance pose, the spotlight, and the feathers. This time I also added black feathers inside the spotlight, but instead of there being 6 of them, there's 7, one for each member. You can also see how I attempted a bit of typography in Procreate, but it wasn't all that successful, which is partially because I have a limited amount of typefaces available on my iPad, so I opted to do that work in Photoshop. I'd also like to stress that I know that some people are successfully using Procreate for typography and design, but I simply find that Photoshop works better for me and for my workflow. After I finished the individual posters and the group poster, I still had 2 ideas I wanted to try out. This time, I wanted to create a bit of a lighter, more positive atmosphere, so I ditched the dark purple background for a white one. By merging the portraits and the feathers, I was able to visually tie the symbology of the falling feathers to the meaning behind the song in a slightly different way. To me, this added the symbolism of feeling trapped in other people's expectations and it being tricky to grow, which is something I think a lot of artists can relate to. Because if you get known for one thing, it can be really tricky to step out of that space as you don't want to alienate your audience, yet it might be necessary to grow as an artist. The version where the heads are sticking out of the feather can also be seen as more hopeful, as it focuses more on the attempt to change and break out of the mold that was set for you. Thank you so much for watching. More process videos are up on my YouTube channel, and check out my social media accounts and my website for more of my work.